Hello above top secret. It all started in February 1967. Then, the American meteorological satellite ESSA-3 sent pictures to Earth that alarmed the world. A huge round hole was visible in the area of the North Pole, and no one doubted that it was not a fake. However, to this day, people argue about what is shown in the center of the North Pole in the photograph. Some say that there is nothing unusual in the picture, just a play of light and shadow, which at that moment was formed as a result of the tilt of the Earth in relation to the position of the Sun. But others believe that this is a hole leading into the internal cavity of our planet. Here are the pictures. On November 23rd, 1968, photographs were taken by the American ESSA-7 apparatus. There are also pictures of the North Pole in the complete absence of clouds, which show a black hole in the North Pole area. Of course, it is very interesting, and most importantly, mysterious. But I remember that Papanin's Russian expedition was at the North Pole, and for some reason, they did not notice the hole there. They drifted on the ice floe for 237 days in 1937 and returned home in full force, becoming folk heroes. On November 29, 1929, American pilot Richard Byrd reached the North Pole in an airplane. But there is one clue, even two. There are doubts that he flew to the North Pole, and his famous diary, where he allegedly saw green grass, beautiful land over the North Pole, and then even communicated there with representatives of another civilization living inside. The inhabitants themselves, the diary says, called their underground country Ariana. Even earlier, in July 1897, Solomon Andre and his two assistants, Swedes by nationality, set off on a risky journey from Danish Island in the west of Spitsbergen in a hot air balloon with the goal of reaching the North Pole. But after flying 475 kilometers, they landed on pack ice and, turning back, moved in an easterly direction, but never returned home. On May 12, 1926, Roald Amundsen, a Norwegian, flew over the North Pole from Spitsbergen to Alaska in an airship. The Italian traveler Umberto Nobile also flew over the North Pole in an airship in 1928. Although this flight ended tragically, 7 people from this team survived. In 1937, trans-polar flights of Valery Chkalov, and then, a month later, of Mikhail Gromov. They opened the air route for the North Pole to America. Since 1945, Soviet and American planes have repeatedly flown to the North Pole to study polar ice. Airplanes are landing on drifting ice. In our new century, flights to the North Pole continue. In May to June 2005, Russian balloonists successfully reached the North Pole using a balloon. All these people, who at different times visited the place where satellite images allegedly show a gaping hole that they did not see. Where are these pictures from? People began to talk about the fact that our Earth is hollow inside in the 19th century. Academician V. Obruchev wrote about the hollow Earth in his novel Plutonia, 1915. Jules Verne in the novel Journey to the Center of the Earth, 1864, and The Smoky God, or A Journey into the Inner World by W. Emerson, etc. In Tibet, they believe that inside the Earth there is Shambhala and Agartha, where powerful beings live, endowed with ancient knowledge and power. The Third Reich not only believed that the Earth was hollow, but even, according to some sources, tried to find a passage to Antarctica. There are still disputes about this between those who believe in a hollow Earth and those who do not. Raymond Bernard writes the book The Hollow Earth in 1969 and then disappears in the caves of South America. Many of his readers believe this, that he had found the entrance to the inner world. Mathematician Leonard Euler voiced the idea that our planet is hollow inside, and in the center of it, there is another sun that illuminates the inner continents. He believed that there was only one hollow shell, which was separated from the inner star by a large space, and in this shell, there were exits at the north and south poles. Edmund Halley, the famous astronomer who discovered Halley's Comet, suggested in 1692 that the shell of the Earth is a thickness of 800 kilometers, 2 outer concentric shells, separated by atmospheres and having their own magnetic poles, and a central core with a diameter like that of Venus, Mars, Mercury, while the sphere rotates at different speeds. He associated the presence of northern lights with the leakage of internal atmosphere. American engineer John Cleves Sims told the world that the Earth was hollow, that it had a habitable interior, and that the poles had holes. He turned to the American Congress in 1818 with a request to finance an expedition to find an entrance to the inner cavity of the planet, but the expedition did not take place, since Congress did not even pay attention to his statements. Emerson's book, The Smoky God, or A Journey into the Inner World, tells the story of the very mysterious journey of two Norwegians, Olaf Jansen and his father. They were fishing in the northern region, and they were carried away by the current into a hole near the North Pole, but they did not die, but ended up in a beautiful world in which lived a highly developed civilization that knew how to communicate telepathically. The inhabitants of the inner world had disc-shaped flying machines that moved at the speed of light. They lived there for 2 years and came to the surface already at the South Pole. His father died there, and Olaf himself was able to get to Europe, but after talking about his adventures, he ended up in a mental hospital, and after 24 years he went to live in the USA, and there met the author who wrote this book, telling everything in detail, showing plans and maps. I would like to add that Olaf Jansen is a real person, but what he said is certainly questioned. In the last century, there lived a very interesting person, politician, ambassador of Chile to India, Bulgaria, and Austria, Miguel Serrano. He communicated with such famous people as Indira Gandhi, Dalai Lama, Rolex, etc. After World War II, he worked at the UN. It was he who put forward the incredible theory of a race beyond people, which the Third Reich really liked, especially regarding the existence of a hollow earth. Serrano believed that one could get inside the earth through a system of caves in the Himalayas, Tibet, the Andes, and also near Antarctica, where there are oases of warm waters. The theorist of eternal ice, Hans Herbiger, also believed that the earth was hollow, and that it would be possible to hide inside if the moon suddenly fell to the earth. For us, this is complete madness, but the Nazis did not think so, and made expeditions to the South Pole. Everyone knows that in 1947, the American military expedition, High Jump, under the command of Admiral Byrd, spent 6 months off the coast of Antarctica for scientific purposes, taking for the same scientific purposes the aircraft carrier Casablanca, 25 aircraft, 7 helicopters, a submarine, 12 tankers, and almost 5,000 crew. So you could just go and conquer a small country. And here is a scientific expedition, and they began landing in the area of Queen Maud Land. By the way, there are various myths about this expedition. And then, at the end of the 20th century, Byrd's diary, allegedly written and kept secret, surfaces. As you can see, the theory of the hollow earth developed long and persistently over more than 1 century, but not one of these tales is supported by any evidence or artifacts, and suddenly, wonderful pictures from NASA taken in the late 60s. Friends, this is simply mind-boggling. I know from myself. I also believed at first, but I know that under the ice, there is a normal Arctic Ocean, and the ice does not reach the ground. That is, the ocean there is in a liquid state, and the ice is only on top, and currents carry this ice, so they drift. It is this drift that has been used more than once by travelers, discoverers, and researchers. Below is water, above is ice. Everything there has been combed up and down, by plane, on foot, and on icebreakers. Quite recently, there was a Russian scientific expedition that lowered its bathysphere with a flag. The shortage of satellite images is due to the inclination of the planet's orbit, as well as the fact that the sky there is constantly overcast with clouds. But there are satellites that systematically photograph our poles, and they have not found any holes there. It is unknown where the ESSA 3 and 7 images came from. Scientists are in no hurry to comment on them, and even academic science does not know exactly how our planet is structured inside. And the Kola Super Deep Well showed that not everything is true in theory about the internal structure of the Earth. We cannot say that the hollow Earth does not exist. This has not been proven. You cannot say that a hollow Earth does exist. This has not been proven either. But we can talk about the hole at the North Pole. It is not there, and this has been completely scientifically proven, examined, researched, combed, photographed thousands of times, and we can call it a day. and what is known in old NASA photos needs to be fully understood by specialists. Most likely, the black spot in the image is a shooting defect. Don't know. Thank you. The picture taken from more of a side view of the Earth does not look like a hole at all to me. It looks like circular open water with a cloud above it. Same with the other pictures, circular open water. I am sure the inner Earth holds many mysteries, maybe even ancient or modern advanced bases of our own in carved out sections. But like you, I doubt that there is a whole, intact, spinning planetary body nested within our own Earth. Would be really cool, but the forces at play one would think would be detectable. Also, one of my favorite all-time science fiction authors, Edgar Rice Burroughs, in his series At the Earth's Core, circa 1914, about his fictional inner Earth called Pellucidar, and the myriad movie and series adaptations for television through the years. It has been many decades since I read the series. However, even as a child reading those concepts, it never did engender any actual belief, even after having read the purported exploits of Admiral Richard E. Byrd. It is passing strange to consider that these apparent professionals would stake their reputations on the belief of an inner Earth and sun, and spend their lives searching for an entrance into their fantastical imagined world. As you state, who knows what they might have envisioned or seen that apparently held in their mind and belief systems some kernel of truth, or at least it was truth according to their perspectives, to their perceptions. I know that in my life I have witnessed and experienced many apparently miraculous and enigmatic events that happened both to myself and to those that also witnessed them. There are some tantalizing aspects of theoretical subquantum physics that offer the possibility of an explanation to those occurrences. So, I can't certainly discount that which I have not witnessed, but my heavily weighted skepticism does keep balance with the unknown or not understood, and how it finds expressions in the claims of those who purport to witness and observe such phenomena. Thank you for providing me the opportunity to ruminate once again on this inextricably amazing existence that we all get to share and be a part of. When I was a kid from the ages of 3 to 7, I used to see and was mortified by these really weird short-looking people on a semi-regular basis. Best I can describe them was a humanoid body. They were about 4 to 5 feet tall. Their faces looked somewhat of a human that was extremely burnt and charred, with something that looked like red lipstick over their mouth and eyes to hide the burnt areas, and they wore these kind of silver-looking onesie like pajamas. Oftentimes, I'd see them when I was alone in the kitchen or trying to take a shit in the bathroom, but sometimes they would appear in the living room when my whole family was present. The earliest time I recall seeing them, I was like 3, almost 4 years of age. My family and I lived in Los Angeles at the time. At the latest, I was almost 8 years old. My family since then moved from Los Angeles to Guadalajara, Mexico. I was most often visited by these weird burnt-looking humanoids when I lived in Guadalajara. When this would happen, I recall everything going black, as if someone turned the lights off, and the only thing that was clearly visible was their face and bodies. They would often just stare at me, or make attempts to reach out to my face. Sometimes, I'd be with my family and the lights would go out. Everything around me would disappear, and before I'd know it, I would be surrounded by these creatures for minutes at a time. Then suddenly, they would disappear, the lights would come back on, and everyone was doing the same thing that they were doing before the lights went out. It was as if they froze in time while the lights were out, and I had gone to a different plane. When I lived in California, I was physically dragged by the ankles out of my bed to an eerie-looking red hole that appeared on the wall. I remember hearing my mom saying a prayer of some sort. The lights came back on, and there was weird fluorescent symbols on the wall that looked like sigils. My family was deeply religious. After seeing these things for years, my family decided that it was best that we told the church so they could pray for me, in hopes that these things would go away. Oddly enough, I remember going to church one day in Guadalajara. My family and several people stood around me, holding my shoulders and my head, while the priest, we were Christian, not Catholic, did a prayer. I recall feeling some kind of nausea, and I began to vomit in front of everyone. I don't recall feeling anything different other than the nausea, but ever since that day, I never saw those burnt-looking things again. To this day, I'm not a religious or spiritual person. My family remains religious. I have absolutely no explanation as to what any of that was. I am 45 years old now, and every now and then I still remember and try to make sense of what I experienced, but I just don't have an explanation. That is freaky. Did your family see them too? When you were dragged out of bed, did your mom witness that, or did you tell her afterwards? My mom said that she had put me to bed and was cleaning the kitchen/living room. She said she heard signs of a struggle in my bedroom and me crying. She opened the door and the room was pitch black and the light would not turn on, but she could see from the light scatter from the hallway that I was definitely being dragged, and that's when she began to pray. She did not see anyone or anything out of the ordinary in the room, which made it even more odd. At some point during the prayer, the lights came on, and I told her I was being dragged by burned-looking people. I told her about the red hole in the wall, which had also disappeared by then, but she did not see it. When I was explaining to her what I saw, that's when I began to see a weird green glow that looked like sigils on the wall. It was pretty faint, kind of like a glow in the dark green in a lit room. She even allowed me to trace some of them with a pencil so she could have an idea of what I saw. Sorry, I did not answer the first part of your question. Nobody else could see them. The rest of my family mentioned that oftentimes we would be having fun, and sometimes I'd go from laughing with them or having a conversation, and I'd start screaming and kicking into the air uncontrollably and began to cry. They could not see anything, but they could not explain why I'd have such a mood swing. Even one of my uncles, who is a doctor, did not have an explanation as to why I would behave in such a manner so suddenly. He witnessed me in a distress like that several times. I even went into his office and consulted other doctors to see if it was a medical issue, but they could not find anything wrong with me. Kek, I believe you. After a night out, a buddy came back to mine and we were just drinking. Not drunk at all, just chatting away, when suddenly an ornament came flying off the opposite wall and hit behind me, landed in my lap. I just looked at my buddy and was like, what the fuck? How did you do that? My brain refused to accept what it had just witnessed. He starts freaking out, saying he saw it fly across the room too. Suddenly, he gets pulled by something invisible, both feet first, like 6 feet along the ground. Small town holy man can see the dead, he says, also sees the afterlife. I posted this last night, but it was kind of an odd/quiet time. My previous effort posts have gotten better traction in the day, so I cleaned it up and will try once again. I would love some input. I attended a funeral in a very small town. The next day, I bumped into the guy who had conducted the services. We ended up talking for almost 2 hours, since he had said something during the service which had piqued my interest. Thing free below. He is a small town guy, old man, 80 plus years old, the pastor of the only church in town, a town of 300 people. By his estimation, he has put 450 to 500 people in the ground over a 50-year career, and had sat with about 150 to 200 of them as they had passed. He told me a couple of things that I thought were interesting, and so I thought to share them here to see if anyone had genuine input. First thing, he said that when he sat with the people as they died, he could often tell the exact moment that the spirit left the body, and it did not always correspond to the signs of physical death, aka, they may have still been breathing or faintly moving/rattling, etc. This also makes sense to me. Also from reading that clairvoyant book on Gutenberg, which talks about the 2 hidden, non-paranormal senses that humans possess, one of which is the ability to sense the presence of others in a space or area without physically seeing or hearing them, including the ability to sense a person who has just left a room, even several minutes later. And this makes sense medically as well, given that movement in the body continues long after brain death in many cases, although he did go on to say that he could sometimes see the souls leave the body in a lightness around the eyes and face that dissipated upward. This last part I thought may have been an embellishment for the benefit of the local rubes, but overall, this section resonated as true and reasonable. Second thing, he said he had had 2 visions of deaths at which he was not physically present, but that he saw at the moment of death just as it had occurred, and both times were somewhat unusual/dramatic. One was a gentleman who had pulled through an intersection on a motorcycle and had been struck by a van and killed. The preacher said he had seen a vision of the exact moment the man had flown through the air and been struck in the right shoulder by the panel piece that extends between 2 windows in a van. This had killed him instantly and broken his neck, and he said he had seen his body flying forward through the air and his spirit going upward. This was apparently confirmed in a hospital, where it was shown that the man had suffered massive trauma to the right shoulder and broken his neck. The other death the preacher said he had witnessed was that of a gentleman who was a known drunk around town. The man would often stagger home from the town's only bar at 2 to 3 a.m. One morning in the dead of winter, he was found frozen to death in his small shack/cabin. Winter in the north is harsh. The preacher said he had a vision of the exact moment in which the guy had stumbled and fallen while trying to put kerosene into the large heater that was sitting 0.5 meters away from the wall, and the guy had drunkenly lurched and fallen behind it, never lighting the heater, which would have saved him from freezing. So again, very oddly specific, but apparently the man was found in the exact same position as the preacher had described. I could not verify this, but I would probably ask another local before I believed him on this one. Third thing, this is what he had said while delivering the service, but I asked him about it again, was that he had had a heart attack a year or so before and had been dead for 5 or 6 minutes, but that while he was gone, he experienced a different reality, and that it was so different from this reality as to be completely indescribable, like nothing about heaven that I had ever thought of, or heard or imagined of, as an exact quote as my memory of a few days ago permits. Keep in mind, this is from a small-town preacher man who had been raised in that old-time religion, streets of gold, etc. He even said that there were no streets at all. Forget golden streets, just a lot of lines and shapes that made no sense, but that were beautiful beyond compare, and gave him overwhelming peace. This is what he said at the funeral. Here is why I thought this was pretty neat, because this is basically apostasy as far as this guy is concerned, and he is telling it like it is to a bunch of small-town folks. It blew my fucking mind, and the way he described his minutes out of his body sounded exactly like a DMT trip, to be quite honest. This is also the part that I thought was least likely to be a LARP out of the whole thing. He also said he could see himself returning to his body and could see his spirit body and physical body separately for some time. Now, my thoughts were overall that he was telling the truth. It is possible that it may have all been a LARP, things he said to bolster his legend around town or increase his own air of mysticism. I do tend to think skeptically as regards human motivations, as a person's desire to feel special and powerful can take many forms, and the only thing I am surprised at by now is that I ever expect anyone to be different. But I did not get a feeling that he was lying, a sense I have developed to a decent degree. So he is either an accomplished liar, which is easy enough to practice, or was telling the truth, or the truth as he interpreted it. Not my story, but my late father-in-law's. Be father-in-law, growing up in rural area of Japan, would constantly explore around the nearby woods. In July one day it was getting late. Around 7 to 8 when he was heading home, he noticed someone in the woods with him. It was this girl, around his age at the time. She was dressed normally, but did not say anything other than screaming to get help. Father-in-law runs back into town and tells the story about the girl screaming for help to his parents. They tell some nearby neighbors who say they'll go look into it. In the meantime, apparently parents are more concerned about seeing the girl than someone being in trouble. For about 3 weeks afterward, father-in-law would have a recurring nightmare about the girl, where she is just screaming, and instead of eyes, there are empty black pits. Be about a week after nightmares stopped being recurring, in the house one day. Father-in-law is in the kitchen making a snack when he unmistakably sees the same girl in his house. Makes a run for it and locks the doors. Tells a neighbor, and they search every corner of the house, but no sign of anyone else. One night, this girl would appear in his bedroom. Once again, empty pits for eyes, but she disappeared just as soon as she had appeared. After a while of sightings, he went to a Shinto priest in the town to explain what had been going on for some time. Priest tells him something along the lines of an evil spirit had followed him and is trying to ruin him. Priest performs a ceremony to keep the spirit at bay, not banish it, but it can't directly harm him. At around age 19, father-in-law moves into an apartment in Kyoto, and the sightings had been sparse. But one night, he was watching TV, heard a knock on his apartment door, opens it, no one there. Looks down the hall, and sees the little girl again. About 2 years after that, of very sparse settings, father-in-law immigrates to America with his wife Timeline of this would have been 1987, I think. Being 1987-ish, father-in-law and wife had come to America, living in California at the time. Father-in-law is working on cleaning up the house's garage when he hears the door to the garage open up. Turns around, sees empty-eyed girl. She is looking visibly angry. Disappears. After a few minutes, he begins to hear loud slamming on the garage door. Father-in-law describes it as if someone had repeatedly thrown themselves at the garage door at full force. Lifts door to see no one there. 2 years later, his son will be born, and on the morning after his birth, he saw the empty-eyed girl throughout the hospital. He stands his ground. No words exchanged, but he apparently stared down the entity. Said he could feel the absolute anger that this thing gave off. Yes, he would refer to the empty-eyed girl as a thing. About 4 years after that, his daughter will be born, would see the empty-eyed girl again. From then on, sightings of the entity would happen in cycles, where it would appear, activity would happen, but after that it would stop for weeks, months, and on one occasion, years. Fast forward some years, father-in-law is with me, hanging out, at mine and my fiance's place. Says he sees the empty-eyed girl again, right out our window. He tells me the story of the girl and sightings of her. Tells me he's sure that he will have to face it again when he dies. He apparently had seen her again on the wedding day in 2016. Father-in-law finally passes away last June. Not of COVID, but had a brain aneurysm immediately after winning a poker game with coworkers. 2 weeks prior to his death, he admitted to me that he knew he did not have much time left, and that it could possibly be waiting. Be me, 15, American. Go to rich private school in Desert State. School is super old. Used to be a Catholic church. Main offices are still there, but the chapel is not. Rumors about there being a cemetery on the grounds. Get curious. Decide to go digging. Turns out church has been there for decades. Definitely cemetery on school grounds. Do more digging. Find old photo of church in late 1950. See off to the side. Gravestones. Jackpot. Wait until the weekend and make my move. Grab a few friends and make our way to school. Live in middle of nowhere desert. Super cold at night. Get to school and head over to where the gravestones were in the photo. Turns out it's on the soccer field. We are so fucked if we get caught. Start digging. Had to stop a few times because cops, but eventually we dig deep enough until one of us puts his shovel in and we hear it. Crack. We just broke a fucking femur. Oh, we are so cursed. 2 of us get rowdy. Cops come back due to noise. Book it. Get to school next week. Fucking police tape her on hole. Hear announcement in homeroom that detectives will be coming by to talk to us and ask us questions. Rumors going around that they think the bones are recent. Thinking I'm about to go to jail for whatever my 15-year-old brain thought. Had mega anxiety at the time. Nothing happens until a month later. School is cancelled out of the blue. What the fuck? Okay, day off. Have friend whose mom works in admin office. Hears that detectives are talking to the principal almost daily. No school for the whole week. Walk by campus to see what's going on. Hear what sounds like a fucking construction site where we were digging. Meet with admin office mom friend later. Tells me the feds are involved. Feds are basically excavating the field. School went back to normal next week. Field was back to normal. Students who ask immediately suspended. No sign of principal. Heard he resigned.